So this is me. I'm involved in the huge, fabulous range of people involved in sustainable development and change across social, economic and environmental spheres in Cornwall for a while. And I'm here, I have many hats, and I'm here with my Cafe Disruptive hat on, and other Cafe Disruptors in the room here, because I've just seen them. And it's basically people who are dealing with some of these big disruptive questions and figuring out why they're so difficult to engage with. And I want to just talk about a few simple things about what a sustainable Cornwall might look like. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of ways we can do this, right? I'm just going to concentrate on a couple of things at a very practical level, because we are talking about what parish and town councils can do, and individuals in relation to the Cornwall Neighbourhood Plan. So before we start, can you, in the next 30 seconds, tell the person next to you, I'm sure if you didn't pick it up, that what Stefan was giving you was very, very bad news, then pop down here and I'll draw you a picture. But it's very bad news if we really want to engage with the truth of it. So if you just turn to the person next to you and tell the person next to you how it made you feel, not what's going on in here, what's going on in your belly. You've got 30 seconds to do that.
Yeah, there was some news there that was worse.
Thank you. If anybody here is all right with that, how many can I ask then, how many people have had a conversation about climate change to anybody at all in the last week, apart from today? Wow! How many people, I said, have had a conversation with somebody about climate change in the last week? Can you just do that again? Because that was glorious and marvellous. Okay, right, your job is definitely to do that more. After today, however much you've done it today, then go out and do it twice or 3 times as much. This is really, really important, because this is one of the biggest silencers of our times. Right, okay, very, very quickly. We know what some of the issues are. They're very broad, and in case you don't, that is clearly linked to climate change, because climate change is linked to fossil fuel burning and production. A lot of this is to do with plastics, and we have this. And we have that, which a lot of people, that's in terms of the bee decline, and we have this because we are managing to destroy a lot of the coral reefs across the world, and we have this. This came out, I think, about 2 years ago. We actually surpassed ourselves, and as of last year, we now know that we've managed to kill off 60% of the wildlife. That's not 6, that's not 16, that's 60%. That's a very dangerous place to be. And that is largely because we have completely wrecked habitat in terms of development, as we've sort of been mainlining fossil fuels to take us forward. And in terms of climate, this was just last year. These are the numbers of cost Christian Aid reckons some of these. This was just last year. Now that's just the economic cost. I'm just going to give you some of the bad news for the first couple of minutes before we go on to what we might need to be thinking about. Last year, in 2 days, 23,000 spectacled fox bats died over a weekend. That's a third of the species, because the temperatures went off the graph. Within 3 or 4 months, this is in Australia. In Australia, we're looking at losing at least 500,000 head of cattle in freezing floods. That's 3 or 4 months later. So we're looking at massive shifts, what Stefan was talking about, these huge regional differentiations that are absolutely catastrophic in terms of their violence and their extremity. In Europe, just in case we think that temperate climates can escape from this, Norway lost 50% of its crops because they don't do irrigation in the same way that other places might do, because usually have a lot of rain. And it's costing these sorts of figures. Now, if we think those extremes elsewhere aren't going to have an impact on us, have a little think about where we import and export to and from, and who we rely on. And of course, the year before in Cover Act looked like this, and this, and this. And it's not just the economic impact, it's a social impact in terms of how we feel about our homes, how secure we can feel, how we can plan for our lives and our children. And this This is one of the IPCC reports. I know that Stefan doesn't like this particular graph, but he has a great view of more detail than I. The IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released a report in October last year that said essentially, if we want to keep below 1.5 degrees, which would be nice, but is looking really unlikely, then we have effectively 12 years to do it. That means that my children will be the age I was when I had them then. So what sort of decisions will they be making? What do I need to start having? What sort of conversations do I need to start having with them about the thinking they have around themselves having children when they're of child-rearing age in their lives? These are really significant, big existential issues. Existential threat, which is the word from the IPCC, means our existence is threatened. It doesn't really get any more serious. So, I'm just going quickly into that last point that Stefan made. We are already at 1 degree higher globally. It is a global average. And if you're talking about 1.5 degrees being on threshold, that's higher than pre-industrial levels. There's lots of uncertainty about what exactly we mean, but we are already at 1 degree higher. So we're trying to not go 0.5 degrees higher than that. It's really unlikely we're going to stop it now. And if you talk about it in the visual, this is a very simple diagram. Sort of pre-industrial is at the bottom, we're about there, and then it starts getting very, very, very bad. About 4 degrees, global average, you're talking about 75% of the world's population living in what Stefan referred to as lethal, deadly temperatures. And as he said, if they're living somewhere like that, they're going to want to move. As I would. So we're here, we've already got droughts, floods, heat waves, 60% of the world's wildlife has gone, and Norway lost 80% of its crop. So if you want to talk about how we need to change, what we're looking at is that level of distinction, that level of variation, that level of change, starting now. So, who said that? For those that can't read, at the back, right now we're facing a man-made disaster of global scale, our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change. If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. The world's people have spoken, their message is clear. Time is running out. They want you, the decision makers, and the decision makers are parish and town councillors, actually, to act now. Anybody any idea?
David Attenborough.
Exactly. Do you know who the most trusted person on the planet is in lots and lots? Exactly. Right. Okay, enough said. And just in case we think it's just about the environment, we have massive levels of inequality, which is a hideous nexus with these climate change impacts. We now have so many food banks in Cornwall that we need a map. And as one surgery last year said, his most frequently issued prescription is food supplements. We are one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and we have what we like to think has hugely well-developed infrastructure in terms of our region. We have massive levels of poverty and inequality. Who gets hit first when the weather starts going doolally? Always the most vulnerable. So, and if we have that level of poverty already, we cannot afford not to be engaging absolutely with this issue of climate change because we know some of the impacts. Now, has anybody seen this? It's done the rounds a lot. Essentially, there may well still be there may well be people out there who don't think this is happening. I think it's unlikely they'll be here today. But even if you think it's a hoax, we can make a much, much, much better world and solve some of those issues around climate vulnerability on the most vulnerable, issues around food, issues around energy, by dealing with the climate crisis, because it's linked to everything else. So, the importance of the crisis, the burning trouser syndrome, is it can wake us up. We've known about this for a very long time. Some of us numpties have been trying to do stuff on this for ages and ages and ages. Now there is an extraordinary collective sense of people getting engaged, which is brilliant. And what we need is the imagination to figure out how we can move ahead, move away from that business as usual track, which we are on. The worst scenarios in those reports, those government reports, those climate reports, are the ones that are linked to the pathway we are on now. That is our direction of travel. So how can we imagine ourselves in a place that's very, very different? So I'm going to just talk very, very quickly about 3 ways in which we can start thinking about this at neighbourhood planning level. This is definitely something that we can do something about. It's not over there for somebody else later. It's here for us and now. So food and farming, we actually import huge amounts of bizarre, like this was from 2012. In May last year, Britain imported nearly 20,000 tonnes of cauliflower and broccoli. What are we growing here? How does that work? And potatoes, we're importing spuds. In actual fact, that is delivering a level of lack of resilience which is quite alarming. In 2018 it wasn't much better, so we've got a 60% ratio of being self-sufficient. Imagine what we could do if we actually prioritised production of food, local food, decent food inside our neighbourhood plans. Imagine if we did that. Do you know what that's a picture of? That's what happens to our soil after a storm. Because we are currently completely demolishing the quality of our soil and it just runs off the land. And what do? We buy more fossil fuel-based fertilisers to put back in because we've knackered it. I know I shouldn't say that, but I recorded, but that is exactly what is happening on that screen. So, what if we considered the notion of food and farming and soil as part of our climate resilience? What if we understood the importance of these things? Because by looking after that, we end up looking after diversity, we end up looking after the places that we live, we might be developing better jobs, we're certainly having decent food that we can rely on. There are loads and loads of networks here in Cornwall and elsewhere, whether it's nature-friendly farming, whether it's to do with soil acquisition, whether it's to do with permaculture. Permaculture just means being able to grow stuff permanently. There's nothing weird or hippie about it. It just means permanently growing rather than increasingly knackering. That's an official term you heard it here today. And what about small-scale farming? This is where the neighbourhood plan could absolutely come into its own. I speak from experience. It's really hard to get innovative, small-scale, food-related businesses through the planning system. I have the scars from this. We need to change our understanding of what local food farming is like. We're not talking about big farms, we're talking about people. There are so many people that I know in my networks who are desperate to get back onto the land, to figure out how they can start growing, looking after the soil, increasing, growing biodiversity, and helping their kids understand that milk comes from a cow, if you're not vegan, that potatoes come from the ground, that they don't grow on trees, that how they cook, how they understand health. What about ensuring that our more urban, our town areas can engage with food? Incredible edible Tormodon, my stamping grounds, Merseyside, Northwest, Rocks, and basically they are planting food systems inside towns, outside surgeries, outside police stations, outside public amenity areas, so that and the response when they first started doing this was, what if somebody comes along and takes the food? That would be the point. Bringing people outside to make sure they understand what it is to be outside, what it is to grow, what it is to get your hands in the dirt, what it is to understand food and where it comes from, and getting kids outside. Imagine if we put that at the centre of our neighbourhood plans, and we made that something that we were looking for. There are ridiculous rules around schools now that some of them can grow food but are not allowed to eat it in case it's dangerous. We don't want it to. So imagine if we used our neighbourhood plans to say we want to see this, we want to see kids and outside and food and places all being connected, because then we're looking at increased biodiversity. And if we haven't got a biodiverse place, we haven't got us, we haven't got food, we haven't got quality of life. In Leeds, for example, there's this extraordinary setup where they are looking specifically at things like self-build. I had a conversation with somebody about 4 or 5 years ago. Imagine if you use structural funding to enable people to figure out how to self-build low-impact dwellings. They know how to build them, they know how to repair them, they know how to run them, they know how to grow food next to them. There is room for recycling facilities, bike parking. Oh, far too radical. For God's sake, this is exactly what we should be doing. They use straw bales and timber, using, as it's called, mod cells, shared facilities where you might have a laundry area that everybody can use. Not everybody needs a lawnmower or a washing machine and some of those things or tools that can be shared. It's an urban development, so it works in the towns. Community allotments, private and community gardens, incredibly popular, as it would be. Like, how could it not be? In Bristol, these guys took on the developers and won. So these are the people who have been through this battle. We shouldn't be making battles for people to go through. We should say, this is really easy, Bill. We will help you. Again, self-build, community skilling, low-impact build, renewables as default, small mixed development, social enterprise models. A social enterprise, this is where the economic model comes in. Business is there for social and environmental objectives, using money to do that rather than using social and environmental assets to extract, to hoover out profit, which is the model we have at the moment. Completely insane. Green space and transport links. Like, what is not to like? So if we are talking about housing developments, why aren't we doing them like this? We can definitely do a Cornish version of this. Transport, we do have a Connecting Cornwall 2030 plan. What if we made that really, really hooked up to what some of those terrifying stats are, where we're looking at, we need to possibly be well on our way, at least 45% cut within the next 10 years-ish, if not more than that. How can we make this be a driver for change? And we understand what the benefits are. I mean, you know, it's not rocket science. It's better for air, it's better for congestion, for diabetes and obesity. We have really significant health issues, terrifying health issues. I heard yesterday that we have Cornwall is one of the highest rates in the UK for male suicide. Like, what is that about? If we had decent jobs where people were able to build homes and learn skills and grow food and feel as if they were participating constructively in their community, we might be able to fend off some of these other things, because it's never just one thing. This is about Rubik's Cube thinking. Do you remember the Rubik's Cube? You can get all the orange squares lined up, but you've completely knackered all the other sides. You're not thinking in systems. Pardon?
Got to pull it apart, Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're doing a very good job of that at the moment. A bit for social contact. So imagine, even if we just had bike routes painted in every town and village to make it look as if we are welcome, or we encourage every business to say bikes are welcome here. Maybe you get a free coffee if you come in with a bike helmet. I don't know, let's be inventive about this. These are things we can definitely do at local level. And imagine if that was just more than one place. We're on there, the UK's 10 best traffic-free cycle routes. It's the Camel Trail. We can do better than that. I know it's hilly. I have cycled some of those hills in Cornwall. But I also know there's loads and loads of places where we could be doing this a lot more. Not to mention all these big infrastructural issues that we can give legitimacy to. If we start doing this at local level, at parish and town council level, and we start saying to county, we give you the mandate to be brave and radical and courageous. Imagine what we could do. Imagine what we could do. Because I am imagining what Stefan has painted, and believe me, it's in my head every night and every morning, and it's not a good place to be imagining. I want to imagine this instead. And I've got 2 kids, as I mentioned. They're front and centre. We already have a number of strategies that Sue mentioned, and the environmental growth strategy, which is one of the first in the UK. There are other places elsewhere that are now taking on this notion of an environmental growth strategy. I used to refer to it as like economic growth but better, where we're actually doing the right thing. And if people are taking on the fact that we've now got an environmental growth strategy because it was a good thing, but we're not managing to do anything about carbon, Cornwall has one of, I think it's something about the 4th or 5th worst carbon footprint in the UK. That's not great. And it doesn't sit with that. So if we've got some strategies in place, we need some action. So this says basically that the environment is, all the people who say that the economy comes first have misunderstood, as Stefan says, the physics, the first, second and third law of thermodynamics. If we haven't got a healthy environment, we don't have a healthy community. If we haven't got a healthy community, we cannot have a healthy economy. We rely on this bottom bit to be in place before we can do anything else. So 2 things. Everything is connected to everything else. And everything that you do at parish and town council level in terms of the neighbourhood plan will have an impact on everything else, and you are making a decision as to whether it's a good impact or a bad impact. There is no neutral space here. And secondly, have a little look, I'm not going to go into it now, but have a little look at what Wales are doing, our Celtic cousins. They have a Future Generations Commissioner on their website, where they're looking at, oddly enough, in actual fact, they're looking at these same issues. They're looking at housing, they're looking at things like social prescription, which we're doing lots of in Cornwall, where we're prescribing people and outside rather than pharmaceuticals. They're looking at transport, and they're looking at skills, all the things that make sense to us in Cornwall. So have a little look. So all these things, we could go through these at great length in terms of what we consider sustainability, what the ingredients of a sustainable future might be. Well, by the way, there are quite a few people now, particularly in Extinction Rebellion, which I'm a proud member of. And yep, look at that, look at that. Look at that. That we're way past sustainability now. We're now at the stage where we are losing things so quickly that we have to get to a place of restoration. We have to get it back and start restoring it. There are things that we cannot sustain anymore because we have already lost them. Anybody any idea how many species we're losing a day? 200. 200 species a day we're losing. How in God's name did we get to this position? So all those things, long list, sort of a bit boggling. So one of the things that helps is if we put them in a picture. And I spoke to Kate. This is a picture developed by a fabulous renegade economist called Kate Rayworth. And in terms of what a sustainable future might look like, there are tools that we can use. This is one of those tools. And basically, it's called donut economics. On the outside, you can see what are called planetary boundaries. And we're crashing into those. So you can talk about biodiversity loss, land use change, climate change. If you start in the middle and you start using up too much of the resource, you bust through that outer ring. You're breaching those planetary boundaries. On the inside, all the things that we need for social well-being. These are our social foundation goals. And if you haven't got enough, you're on the inside of the donut. And what she's saying is, we need everything to be in the green space, inside the safe and just operating space. So we've got enough for everybody, and we're being fair, but we're not crashing through those planetary boundaries. So how do we get everybody who hasn't got enough, all those people that are using food banks and need food supplements from their GP, for God's sake, that's a disgrace. How do we get them outside of the middle where they haven't got enough, into the green space, at the same time as bringing in all that resource use to make sure we keep it in the middle. So this is Kate. This is her book. When she did this piece of work in 2017, at least 4 of those planetary boundaries are already being breached, some of them catastrophically. And in fact, we didn't know on all of them because we didn't have the data, so it might not be that great on some of the other ones. I spoke to her yesterday, I had a long chat with her yesterday. She is really keen to see what Cornwall is doing around this, to how we can use the donut to make sure we are on this, we are all over it, and we're dealing with all those things at once. And she refers to this as our 21st century selfie. And it's not the nicest selfie we've ever seen. So, at the moment, in fact over the last few months, Amsterdam, Berlin, Hastings, Scotland, South Africa, many others are taking the donut to figure out how do we do this, how do we make this work, because there's lots and lots of different things, how do we think of lots and lots of different things all at the same time, in order to make sure we pull in that massive threat around climate, because if we do that, we do lots of other stuff. The good news is, we've already started doing this in Cornwall, and we had an amazing donut hack last autumn where we brought together all sorts of people, and I have a very strong suspicion that we have a lot of information already in Cornwall that would let us figure out where we are on each of those social development goals and the planetary boundaries. Imagine if that was our Cornwall Planning Department. Imagine if that's how neighbourhood planning took place at parish and town council level, because we knew how to look at all this. And at the moment, Kate's developing tools to enable people to figure out how do we understand how all these things connect. Because of course they're connected. If you haven't got decent housing, you've got poverty. If you haven't got decent food, you've got poverty. You've got poverty, you've got poor mental health, you've got a massive impact on the health system, etc., etc. So, I should say, I'm giving, with colleagues in this room, we're being asked to give lots and lots and lots of talks on Extinction Rebellion and climate at community level everywhere across Cornwall now. And one of the 3 things that we finish up with by saying, in terms of what people can do, is talk about it. Just a terrifying number of people do not talk about climate ever because they think it's got nothing to do with them. It really has got something to do with all of us. Talk to people, vote. We are telling people to vote for the people who get this and who want to do something about it, because why on earth would you do anything else? So I'm just telling you, as councillors, we are telling people to vote for the people who get this, fair warning. And thirdly, join. Doesn't matter what you join, but don't do this alone by yourself. Don't go home by yourself and look through Stefan's slides alone, unless you've got a lot of alcohol with you, and you can phone a friend. Because this is really, really heavy stuff. This is really heavy stuff. This is about our species. And somebody said we are probably the first generation to realise how dangerous it is, and the last generation that can do anything about it. This is not on our kids' shoulders, but we're putting it there. So join something, whether it's transition, Extinction Rebellion, I'll go for Extinction Rebellion, whether it's a local group that's looking after allotments, or local group working on local poverty, or join the parish and town council, become a council, whatever it might be, but get involved, get stuck in, and make the connection. And just in case you need some information, on the happydisruptive.com website, some of our groupings have put together an incredibly detailed, very practical list of what you can do at parish and town council level. There are lots of people who are going out and talking to their parish and town councils now about how they can get involved. And there's 8 pages of suggestions that you can have a scroll through. You can download it from the website. And you can see what might apply to you, how you can engage with it at your local town and parish and town council level, what you might want to add that isn't there, what you might want to tweak. But we're trying to pull together lots and lots of very practical ideas to make it real, keeping this real. So, in upshot, we can do this. We've already started. The question is simply, what are you individually and collectively now going to do about it after today? Thank you very much indeed.